South Asian Photography Visitors Program. Given the current pandemic, unfortunately, the Biennale shows had to be closed, but they are all available online for you to view. But we thought that it would be great to collaborate and bring some of the artists and some of the art historians and speakers along to take us through some of these shows so that we have more of an engaging experience. So today we have the show, we are going to tour the show yesterday's
Yesterday's news today.
Yesterday's news today. And we have Ursula and Sebastian Riemer with us today. And I hand over to Yasmin, who is the Managing Director of Biennale for Actual Photography, to get us started.
Thank you, Shuchi. Hello, everybody. So we are very happy that you join our fourth session now, I think?
Fifth. This is
fifth
the fifth.
Already, okay, I'm sorry. But yes, we are in Heidelberg, in the Heidelberger Kunstverein, and we have two wonderful guests. It's Ursula Schöndeling, the director of the Heidelberger Kunstverein, and one of our artists, Sebastian Riemer, who will be also talking about his work. So welcome, both of you. I'm very happy that you are joining us. Thank you. And we are showing one exhibition of 6 exhibitions of the Biennale für aktuelle Fotografie, curated by David Company. And it's called, the whole Biennale, it's called The Lives and Loves of Images, as you can see here. And the Lives and Loves of Images are all about our mixed feelings towards photography. So on one hand, we really love photography and we trust it, and we, yes, feel the affection for the images. And on the other hand, we are very skeptical about it and the manipulation of photography, and all these mixed feelings are represented in the exhibitions. And it's about the migration of images. So what images are in the world, how do they influence new images, and yes, all this we can also see in yesterday's news today. And as you can imagine from the title already, that it's all about news photography. And I would hand over to Ursula Schöndeling now and enter the room and see where we get. So again, welcome everybody and have fun.
Hello. Now it's my role to let you all know and welcome you. My name is Ursula Schöndeling. I'm the director and curator of the Heidelberger Kunstverein, and we host the exhibition every 2 years from the Biennale. We are super proud to have yesterday's news today, and this has a certain idea of our institution as itself, because it was funded 150 years ago. That is a very, very long time, and it was funded by the idea that citizens wanted to present visual arts in their hometowns beside the aristocracy. So a new force in society really tried to create a public sphere where to meet with the arts and where to discuss. It was more or less also a salon. It was a public sphere to meet and to get into a dialogue. So for me, it was very interesting that it was the same time when newspapers created the same idea of a public sphere to discuss and to participate. And when we did our jubilee for 150 years in 2019, we decided to create a newspaper and to talk about what we have done in the last decades and centuries. What I want to say is that for me deeply, the idea of a Kunstverein as a platform to discussion is connected to the idea of the society as a whole. And for me, it was also very interesting how artists always participated in forming this idea of what is now at stake. Because in 150 years, the ideas of what art is and how the artist practice changed and how society changed is definitely clear for everybody. And for us, it was super nice to start with this press tour because it's all about a public realm and how we defend these ideas of information, who create the formation of our opinion forming, which is totally important right now. So I think those things really changed in the last decades, and I'm very happy to have here Sebastian Riemer as my colleague to talk to, because I think he is really into the idea of how practice of and looking at pictures is changing. When we start here, we start with a press archive. Sorry, I'm not so well used to talk to a public I don't see. So if you see me looking at this place of my monitor, I always try to gain a bit of contact with my colleagues, which I can see right now. But when we start here with the press archive, maybe Yasmin, you want to join us, because it is very funny how you started to have some local newspapers and to ask them for press material. Maybe you start talking about this for a bit, because you started, we already have some small virtual tour, but maybe you have 2 or 3 words for this.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm very happy. So when we enter the Yesterday's News Today exhibition, we see all this, this very nice display. So all these shelves, and we see that here, these are all photographies, but these are analog photographies. So these are photos from newspaper archives. And the nice thing is that you can see the one side of the photograph, and in this mirror, you see the back side of the photograph. So you have a really like the haptical feeling, and we wanted to show both. So the front and the back, because you have so much information in news photography that you usually don't have anymore when you show it only online, or when you have all the digital files. So you have these information lost. And what you see here is that it's all by keywords, and these keywords are very subjective. So they are chosen by David Company, by the curator. And for example, here you have Ausländer, Aussiedler und Auswanderer. So it's the A for people. Okay, Sebastian, help me. Auswanderer, Aussiedler,
migrants and foreigners.
Yes, and on the other side here, it's Bunkerleben, which would be bunker life. So life in a bunker. And here, over here, you see for the keyword Aussiedler, you might recognize him. It's Elvis Presley. So the Presleys, they left Germany to start a new life in the United States on the one hand. So it's a keyword which belongs to this image. But this image is also very funny because, as you can see here, he has a little camera in his hand. And this actually is an advertisement for a film he made where he himself was a photographer. So you have all these little stories behind this beautiful collection of photographs you find in the local newspapers. And this is the entrance of a whole show about the question, what do photographs used in newspapers tell us about our society, about the newspaper, the information they give us, and so on. So this is only a little glance what you have as a really big treasure hidden in the newspaper archives.
Mm-hmm. What I would like to refer to you is one certain question, because if we talk about newspaper photography which was done for newspapers, and we talk about Yesterday's News Today, so it's about the press photo in a way. So what we have here is an archive of older press photos. They were archived by the local newspapers, and I guess in very different ways. So you were talking about the backside, which gives you some expression, what maybe who's the photographer, when was it done, and things like that. But on the other hand, David Campany, the curator, did something very special, because he created another idea where the press photo is now to be looked at. Because going back to the idea of a newspaper, you have the image always on contact with the text. So it is sometimes a bit like to have a kind of illustration of the text message. You can use it also in a contradictory way, that the image is something which is like, hey, what he's writing is maybe not wrong. But most of the time, people who work as image editors or editors in chief, they really try to achieve the utmost sexiest image for the text, which is super important for communication, because newspaper is about communication and sending messages. So what I'm interested in is that these images are always therefore to be seen in a certain frame and to get the communication message around. So what David did is he changed our idea about what is to be seen, because when I see here, yeah, maybe you can talk about this because it's really interesting. Yasmin, because you have the Demonstration and Diebstahl, which is burglary and demonstration in English.
So it's a manifestation or a demonstration and theft. So on the one hand, you have one of these images which are very important to this local, to our local history. It's in front of the Mannheimer mayor's house, and you see on a demonstration one person who just grabs a gun from a policeman and shoots another policeman in the knee. So this is a crucial moment where you see him shooting at him, and so here you have this this photography which is analog, and this moment which is very precise and which you really hardly get. So if you want to have an image of the Kurden demonstration in the 1990s, this might be it. So it's Frau Käse who took this image and who got, I think, quite popular also with the whole press photography. And on the other side of this shelf, you have a very staged photography of somebody stealing a camera from a car. This one, I hope you can see it. So this is a camera, and somebody just is so bad and grabs it out of the car. So this is highly staged, and the other photograph I just showed you is really not staged at all. So this is a glance you can get the range of photos you get in the newspaper.
And the funny thing for me, when I look at this table, you have these two crime scenes on the left and on the right, the staged crime scene and something which is really like the photo which really gets the moment. And on the other hand, in the midst, you created another image. So for me, it is all about reading images. You have a manifestation or public demonstration, and you have one hand, you look from the side of the policeman who really want to crush the demonstration. On the other side, you look at it from the side of the demonstrate. You see the people who march together. So it is also creating the idea of different perspectives, which are here in one, which are here shown, and both of very different ways of staging or being in the situation. So, but funny enough, it's demonstration and Diebstahl. So it's only understandable for Germans because it's something like, it starts both with a D, it's an alliteration in German. So it's also a bit of fun to get those things together, because if you look quite thoroughly, it hasn't to do anything. But it creates a certain atmosphere. So, and it's a bit, also it's about striking. It's one hand, it's a bit of a humor and wit, but on the other hand, it's really like a very strong and inspirational issue, which is also very, yes, controversial to discuss with. So if we go on, maybe, because now we have started with this idea of an archive and how to work with the pictures, we go straight to Sebastian Riemer's work, which we found so inspirational. And I have to say, we had to close to be closed after 2 weeks. But we had some events here, and we had some ideas of to talk to people. So Sebastian, it was super. People were totally impressed by your work. It's not about because it has a very, very prominent wall, and it is so different, but it is also because I think we are in a realm of Photoshop, and everybody is talking about fake news. And I think it's very, very wonderful to have this idea about when you work. So I would like to try to ask you to talk about how your work is constituted, first of all, and then we go maybe in for some reasons in some really examples, and to zoom in, because it's really nice to see.
Maybe for all the viewers, it's important to know these photographs or these artworks are all by Sebastian Riemer. So
yeah.
There are many of them here. And yes, so much to talk about. So I hand over to Sebastian.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on this virtual tour. I hope everyone's doing great today. And yeah, it was very interesting to have this introduction to this exhibition by having a look at this archival material that is, for me, the source material for my works. So I acquire these mostly online on eBay because they became obsolete in the last 20 years, and they were kept in rooms of the newspapers that the newspaper people called morgues. So they would go once in a while downstairs to find an image. And in the 90s and early 2000s, they digitized all the images that seemed fit for the future for them, and tried to get rid of the rest, and yeah, either throw them away or sell them as old paper, whatever. So people made a business and sold them as collectibles. And that's where I came in. I got aware of these in about 8 years ago, and I started to buy them because I was generally interested in the use of photography in my work. And then I quickly found out that those photographs are much more interesting to me in a way that's not the subject matter that interests me. It's more the way how they are as objects, like the materiality of these old prints. So these prints you can buy, they are all what the market for photographs would call vintage prints, meaning that, for instance, the print of the bird we see here, that, or let's say now the soprano with the, okay, back to the bird. Okay, the print that was the source material for this work of mine is a print that was made in about 1922. So the actual piece of paper is almost 100 years old. And what was interesting to me is to see two things. First, we have this kind of, let's call it artistic archaeology, that I go down and find those images and try to ask myself questions about how could they originate. And the other thing we have is that those photographers back then had the same requirements and needs as photographers have today, or news people have today, or the picture industry and the picture economy has today. Meaning that they need to find striking images to tell stories, to sell their newspaper, or photographers to sell their images to the newspaper to make a living. So there has to be a certain idea of when a photograph is good and when a photograph is bad, and when a photograph can be improved. And that's what they did. They came in the time 100 years ago without Photoshop and photoshopped it with a brush. For instance, here, we can go directly into how I would love to have this image to be approached, because what I like about the things I'm working on is that I know as less as someone who is coming into the show and looks at the image. So I don't know why they took a photo of this bird. I don't know what kind of bird this is. But what I know is that I can look at the photograph and try to imagine what happened to the photograph. Instead of what happened to the bird, it's what happened to this photograph. So someone sent a photographer to take a picture of a bird. And 100 years ago, they were very big cameras. So they could not just go out in the wildlife and take a photo of a bird like a snapshot with what we would do today with our mobile phones, but they had to build a studio space, get a bird, which is probably in a cage, then take a photo of the bird, realizing that there are the bars of the cage, which has to be removed. So they cut out the bird by painting around it. Then the bird was not in focus, because with these old cameras, it's very hard to focus. So they had to sharpen the image of the bird with brush again. So what we happen in the end is a painting of a bird applied to a photograph of a bird that was printed in a newspaper. And it was only this very small rectangle we can see that's posing to be a photo of a bird, which is actually a painting of a bird. And that led me to call my series Press Paintings, because I like the ambiguity in this title. Because those people worked for the press, but they were also painting. And it's also about this idea of authorship, that normally in a painting is most visible. It's the one who had the brush in the hand. But here you have a newspaper, you have a photographer, you have the editor who decided what to do, you have the person who retouched it, you have the person who considered that this is not directly garbage after it became obsolete, you have the person who sold it, and then you have the person who bought it, which is me. And then you have again me who decided that it's a good image to be worked on. So you see there are a lot of people involved in here. And what in the end is interesting to me is to find literally tens of thousands of images, or hundreds of thousands of images that I've browsed through in the last years, and to find the pearls that become incidentally images of high interest. Let's put it that way.
Maybe we just, because I know you, we can go on and go on, because I just wanted to go back to one thing, is that you decide which image Mike said on your desk then is reworked on you, because you do a bit of reworking. And that's not only selection, but it's also working on the image itself, because you've, as far as I know, you've taken another photograph of this, and then you have to decide, because this won't be as big as it is here in your in the show. So maybe you can talk about a bit how big, what you want to show with straighten and blowing them up in this way.
Yes, I rephotographed them, but actually did it with a scanner. But the scanner is a camera as a mobile phone is a camera. And what's the gain of a scan image is that you have super high resolution. this is something we cannot see here in this video and which is only perceivable in person. So when you are in the exhibition and see these images, you might get tricked and think that the applied paint is actual real gray paint and that the artist has overpainted a photograph, which is deceiving the eye of the viewer. And that's what I like about scanning them. And on the other hand, I remove something which is color. So these are black and white reproductions of black and white photos, meaning that in black and white is just an idea. It does not exist in reality. Black and white is always greenish black and white, or yellowish black and white, or reddish black and white. And if you put two black and white photographs from different periods next to each other, you will see the difference. So I remove the colors and print them again in black and white, because the applied paint has a color of its own. In this case, it was a bluish paint. And can you go a bit to the left again, please? Mm-hmm. And there is you see this black mark that was reddish. So all of this is gone, as well as the vintage patina's touch of this old photograph, which for me makes them contemporary again. So I refresh them by making them black and white.
And you can see what you just said, that it's a very high resolution. I think you can see it here a bit, that you can see the craquelé, or yes, that the painting itself is already, yes, a bit tricky. So it's really well visible also here.
Yes. Yeah, so it's also a documentary of the state of these photographs, because the paint is sometimes also falling off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was very funny because I had an intern I really liked to work with, and she was like, "Oh, no, but he did the paint on the photo." And I said, "No, no." But she was really not sure. And I said, "Take a close look at it, because you won't see that there is some paint added on the image." But yes, you were talking about it, and I think it's if you talk about the sheer materiality, blowing them up as big as you did it has also to do with it to show how strong how they worked on the picture, right? Because it might be interesting for people really who are not able to see the show right now in real life. We have to really focus on what you're working with and how you do it, because for us it was really interesting that you do it. You choose so different photos and different ways of working on the photo. Which maybe
so the cliche idea of an artist is that it's a male painter.
Great. Yeah.
And that means, and the second cliche idea of an artwork is that it's something that has been done by the artist himself or herself in that matter. And what I do is that those things who are visibly done to these photographs are not done by me. They are only made visible by me. And this is like one of those understandings that I have of photography, how you can do it nowadays, is that you don't have to actually create new stuff by going out and taking a camera, placing it between the reality you see and yourself, and click and wait for the right moment to happen. But it's also possible to do photography in a completely different way, which is looking backwards and see what has been done and what can the way how people used to deal with photographs tell us nowadays about our situation, our condition. And that the photograph becomes more than its subject matter. It becomes a complete an image that you can think about and think and look at. And while you do that, think about current imagery or current things, like maybe you have this stereotyped Tahiti girls on the right, or you have this football soccer player on the left who was actually glued on a photograph and then fell off. And what you have is only the shade that's left, and after the shade, behind the shade, you see an empty stadium. So when you think about our current crisis, where you have an empty stadium without the football players anymore, that's something that becomes incidentally interesting as something you would never get as a subject matter, because the actual subject matter has gone completely from this image. What's left is just the background.
And I think this is a very nice connection also to the press archive we just saw on the shelves, because here you have the object, the photography as an object. As you said, the cut out football player fell off, so he's not there anymore, but he was glued on this image. So it's really interesting that you have these collages and all the little made-up things to improve these images. And on our shelves, we also can see that all the images there are put into a certain context, but some of them are also like improved, being glued up and and being manipulated. So yes.
Yes.
I would like to go back to some different perspectives, because I'm always keen on talking to the public. And while we were installing our, somebody is really good, the setting light, he said he was going through and he tried to really recover and say, who's the one on the photo? And this was very funny for me, because he said, the Tahitian girl is the wife of Marlon Brando. So the idea was always to make sense, to know this belongs to a collective memory. And I really like to, if there is somebody who's really famous for being a Hawaiian woman, is the wife of Marlon Brando for a certain generation. For another generation, maybe not. But it was very funny, because you have these ideas of this conventional refiguring what's on there, because I think what you said, it's not, well, let me get back and step back a bit and ask you, so what's your motivation of finding those images? Because the motivation of looking at it is sometimes to rediscover these certain moments in time or the ideas, but what is your motivation to find these images?
Yes, it's the motivation that kept me going doing this is that there are images hidden inside this flood of garbage that, yeah, it's literally garbage.
Yeah, I know about
unless someone comes and declares it non-garbage. And it's that there are images that are super interesting on many different layers. So first, it's a conceptual layer that interests me. Then there is, of course, the most important, the visual layer. Like, what kind of visual information do you get? Why do you have to see this blown up like 20 times or 30 times its original size? What happens then? What is this? Is it enabling the viewer to see more details, but what do the details tell? And how is it that I work on these, that I do the same as the newspapers, but reverse? So the newspaper, they printed them in black and white, and printed them very, very low resolution in a Band-Aid dot printing grid. So you would lose all details and you would only go to the subject matter, to the situation, and then you would have the caption telling you that's Marlon Brando's wife in Tahiti dressed up as a Tahiti girl. And I wanted to go the reverse way, so that you would not look on the subject matter. Of course, you cannot not look on the subject matter. It's the same as if you look on a Velázquez painting of Philip II. You cannot not see Philip II, but there are so many people who painted Philip II, And why is it a Velázquez painting that's interesting and not Philip II? You know, imagine you would have a exhibition of, we have 100 Philip II paintings. Who cares? You know, it's the same. That's about this idea of pictorial quality that lies in these things, and that can be rediscovered and re-evaluated by the people who see these works and try to see the beauty in those details that can be revealed by scanning them, by caring actually for these things, and also caring for the people again, because the people were just used as subject matters to illustrate something and abused in some ways when they have been cut off parts of their bodies, overpainted heavily in a way, and became defaced, I don't know, zombies of what they were. And now I value them again, so that I print them bigger than life size to see actually how people can become material in a way for a newspaper use or for an economic. For instance, here in this is it's a photograph of a British lord, and it has been heavily overexposed on the left side. So they completely repainted the left side of his face, making him look like in a scary movie.
Yes.
Yeah, but could you also show the other one? It was, yes, it's always a bit crazy looking at it. No, on the other side. On the other side. No, not the woman. Yeah, the man who's shooting, and this guy here. Yes, thank you, Yasmin. This is right. Atelier Press win, because this is also something which I found very interesting by seeing the lines which were put on the photograph itself. So maybe it's also a bit of translation. We need help, because you are a photographer and you can see exactly what they're doing with this with the photo. So sometimes I really needed a lot of time to discover what is exactly done with them. You know, you see the marks, but you can't translate it to which kind of abuse or rediscovering or make it up is done with the person you are showing here. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about this reworking and what you find so interesting in especially this work. So
in one sentence, the reworking has only been done to make a small image fit into a column, which is money. So it's space in the newspaper, and that means money. But what for me interesting in this image is, can you see the snow on his socks?
Yes.
There is snow also in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And that was totally wonderful for me, because it had this poetic moment. And also the way how he is acting there reminded me more of a Renaissance drawing or a Renaissance painting than of a newspaper. Also, when you see how the hand is stretching out, there are so many Leonardo drawings of such a very similar moment, and it's so graceful that it's completely contradiction. It's a complete contradiction to the harshness that he was cut out. So it's an image that is very beautiful on these two things, that you have something very harshly and brutally done with with this paint, and then you have this photograph that has so painterfully things in it, but it's totally photographic. And that was one of the reasons why I chose this work.
And it's very nicely how you bring it together, because I think when you talk about the hand, it's also stretching out from the space of the image, while what they done to the image is that they fit it into this column, and it's the other way around, where they freed the bird, they catch this guy and brought it back to the column. Yeah. While they. you have a so-called freed bird because he went out of the cage.
Yeah. Well, let's stay a little bit longer on this image of this person. When you look at the top right, it's completely empty. It's an absolutely vast space. That's out of question for a newspaper, but it's so important for my work because it really shows there was a moment kept maybe this a few seconds before the person was standing and then got into action, and then the camera person took the photo. Or what about the hand? Is it a hand like, hey, don't take a photo of me now, and it's just raising to show, no, not now? Or is it a hand that's about to catch a ball? It's not, we won't know. And this balance of, it's something that it's in perfect balance, that you don't know what's going on. It's completely indifferent. And that's something that was striking for me.
It's also funny that you mentioned it's snowing, so it's very cold. But obviously what they needed was somebody who has a tank top on. So he's in a summerish situation for the newspaper, although it's really cold. And here is a jumper. So this is also a nice contradiction between this, painterly qualities of the photography and the sharp graphic of the painting, and then the summer and the winter aspect. So it's
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned this. Yeah, it's just the idea of an athlete. He has to wear a tank top, of course. Yeah.
And this is also bringing back to the conventionalities. But I have to say that it was very, very nice to hear you describe this special image, because you see that also selection has a lot to do with a lot of sensibility for the picture itself. And that is very, for me, in fact, if you have different ways of perceiving what is an artist, I would say these close reading of the image itself, and then to choose it for its sensible, for his might be paradoxical ways of looking at it, of his delicacy and how the snow falls on his socks and things like that. I think this is very important if we talk about the artist's role here in selecting images. Well, because sometimes it makes it all short if you talk about fake news, it's also about, oh, I show you how they did it before Photoshop was done. But it is a lot more. I think it's a lot more about this kind of concept of reworking a picture. But let me ask you about one picture I was always very fond of. It is, it's here in the, I'm sorry, you can't see me because I'm pointing on my monitor. You see, I'm not used to this kind of, I want to have the guy who's shooting.
This one, right?
Mm-hmm. No, who shoots? Yes. No. Yes, here. Thank you. Because
okay.
This was also when we looked at it, we could not imagine how those things got together. But you say it's just glued, right?
Sorry?
For us, we could not understand how they worked with this picture at all.
Yes.
Because we could not understand how it is done and why you choose it. Because for us, when we're standing and discussing as a team, what's happened here? What will the newspaper do with this? Or what is the original, and why did they work it over in this way? So you have this guy, and he really here in the midst, and then you have, and you see, it seems that it is just glued a kind of portrait into another picture.
Yes.
But what for? Because
no, it's not glued at all. It's overpainted.
Okay.
They have nothing being glued on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there are certain things you can find out, but the most the most important rule for all the ways they overwork these photographs is they needed to get better photographs, but better not in an aesthetic way, better in an economic way. Mm-hmm. So this photograph of a person holding a gun was just too talky. Mm-hmm. So it was an article maybe about this person, so they don't need a photograph of him holding a gun. Not to mention that they don't want to waste the space in the newspaper, mm-hmm. unless it's not important for the story. Mm-hmm. So maybe this person has been promoted, I don't know, whatever was there that he was chosen, and they only had a photograph of him holding the gun in their morgue. So they just took it out and they said, okay, we will not need this photo of him holding a gun anymore. Mm-hmm. So we will just overwork it because that's the way how we need him now. So maybe he was just a general on the field and now he became Minister of Defense. And so he has to be a friendly person and not a person holding a gun. That's just my story.
But it was really like, if you look at these, if you start really taking times with the photographs, if you're not looking at who is it, but taking time, we said to ourselves, but this can't be this guy because the arm would cover his face. So what did they do here? And sure, you said before that they were overpainting it, but we also had this idea that the face itself should be much bigger if you have this super big hand. You know what I mean? It's like you could not understand that it's the same person used. Huh?
Mm-hmm. This is something that you can rediscover with your mobile phone because there's a wide angle lens, or also here you see this wide angle lens deforming my hand.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is the same thing that happened here. So everything that's closer to the camera becomes much bigger than we would have in normal sight, and that's something you would not notice normally.
Mm-hmm,
so
exactly.
when you have booked an Airbnb room and you enter the room and then you're shocked how small it is. that's the same thing that's working here.
But here, I think it's really impressive because when you're talking about this, what they did, because that's what I want to say as a beholder. Even if you have a closer look, you make up your mind and you start thinking, what are they doing? By hell, what they are doing with this photo, and how could they ever think about this guy and why it is so small and things like that. So I think the reworking of it, and that's why I said you glued it on. It was super important to say, no, it is not glued. This is just overworked by paint. But the whole perspective makes it such a strong gesture, and I think this is one of the examples how strong this can be, and in a visual way how strong this overworking can be. And you can see how the let's say the original photography has its own conceptual or compositional ideas, and it's also faking the so-called documentary style. So this is also something here.
But you can also not trust me, but all the lies I'm telling you since 40 minutes, it's a work of art now, and it has no reality in it whatsoever. You might think of a photograph, you know, it's like, maybe it has been overglued and I just tell you bullshit. It's
but I think that's what I said.
It's just, I really like to not feel at ease when you look at photographs, not feel at ease as the photographic industry wants us to. So to use a photograph as something that's easy. It's not. When the more close you look at it, the more problems you will have. And that's something that gives me a lot of joy thinking about.
And it's also about, I guess, if I can say so, it gives you a lot of joy to think about it, but it's also a deep love for images who gets you there. Or?
Certainly.
Because otherwise you wouldn't. Because when we were preparing for this, because we're not super prepared, but we were talking about that I'm sometimes confronted with the idea, you do a photo biennale and you show us artists who are not doing photographs any longer. Yeah? This is something which I found I'm often confronted with, and I hope your speech has helped the bit to really make people understand that an artistical practice nowadays is also very important to look at all the pictures and to really rediscover the ways they are worked out, they are worked with, and also for what I said, it's the whole dialogue with you and the dialogue that there are so many authors, which you said there is a certain row of people who participated to bring this picture now to the Kunstverein's wall and to get you as an artist to make it as an artwork. Still, that there is something in this whole process which goes back to the public sphere too, because it's in my opinion, it's very important that we have a closer look what is done, how it is done, and on the other hand, to enjoy the part of reworking photographies or looking at it, but also to but I just wanted to say, maybe it's my English which makes me a bit happy to understand, but what I want to say is that I'm so honored to have this and just to talk about it and to present it, because I think it's such a beautiful work, and it really talks to people, and it's a kind of conceptual work which is totally understandable and totally interesting, but on the other hand it really gives the work with the material, and what David always says, it's a material work. This is photography. So if we would just have a glimpse to the other two artists we can present right now in the last 7 minutes of our talk. I would like to step back to Thomas Hof. And it was really funny because I think you had a show at the Folkwang Museum, and I think it was done with the curator of our last Photo Biennale with Florian Ebner. And the artist we're talking about is Thomas Hof. What we do when we start from the press archive, where we started from, is now that it's another way back, because what is written on what you see here are photos, and then you see there are some kinds of printing, there is also handwriting, there is something which is kind of glued, not glued, but stamped. And what he did is that he scanned both sides and brought both sides on one side. So you don't have to look at the mirror. You have both sides of the photography on one side of the photography. So it is still important for us to see how the archival way to put them into a certain kind of reading, which is in the archive, it is now seen by everybody. Not to stop you from the dialogue, and Yasmin, please step in, because this is not this kind of guided tour. Somebody is talking all the time, but I want to talk to you because it was very funny when we talked about this, and I told you that people really tried to get the subjects in your work, Sebastian.
Yeah.
And here, while the subjects in your work are so different, they are so different, and the sizes are also very different, and we heard why it is the same. So when we look at Thomas Hof's work, you need to go a bit back, Yasmin, and to show us the whole work. Mm-hmm. You come much closer to the idea of a series, which was really popular in photography. So lots of people think in series, some kinds of subject work, and they all have to be more or less the same size. and to be framed at the same size. And we find this here again. And I think it's the idea of a series is done, is here just worked out very strongly. So if you have a short, just let us see the whole space, because you will understand. It's much more belonging to this idea of a series. And if you have a closer look, you have car crashes, and you will see, yes, maybe you will zoom back again to the car crashes.
There's one here.
Here, the car, and then, and you, if you just do a roll, because I think the idea of a series is also it's also interesting to see what is the other parts of the series. Again, car crashes. And it's again, next. Super. And I want to see some of the Apollo. So what we were discovering is when we took some guided tours, the people responded in a very different way. So because we have to make people understand sometimes, if they are younger and they're maybe born in the 90s or so, that these pictures refer to a certain age, which we call the space age, or in Germany, the Sputnik shock. So it was a very full of ideas of a Cold War principle to be in, to really show off how big your technologies were in front of you, and how good it's a bit like a boys game, like, I don't know the word in English. Hi, Johan. Maybe you know the word in English about quartet spielen. Do you know the name in English, Sebastian? If you remember things like that, you have some cards, yes, and with tanks, and on the tanks were written, and down there it was written how many cubic meters they had, and how much fuel they needed, and how much how much destruction they could oppose on. So it's very interesting for me when I see these pictures, because it all belongs to a certain age, which technology was the big promise of supremacy in a way. So for Thomas Ruff, I don't know what you think about it, Sebastian. For me, it's a bit like going more into this idea of really looking at a historiographical important area, maybe also for a certain kind of ages, because Thomas Ruff, and I think me too, I'm very interested in these parts which perform a certain age, and I think the Cold War is a crucial area, and for me sometimes this makes sense. On the other hand, you have the car crashes, and you go back to David Campany's work, who's also concentrated on the idea of a car, which forms a lot of the Western society's self-confidence, maybe the car as one of the central economical leaders, the car as a piece of individual freedom. So the car crashes also are some symbol of when this idea crashes. So for me, these kinds of presentation are more belonging to a certain kind of historiographic grab on these ideas of the photography, bringing back the yesterday's news today, to look at it again, and to see the archival material, which is not readable for every generation, but for a generation who has a bit of connection to it. And if we go up, So
Yeah.
I think it's a big difference between your approach to show us the materiality of the pictures, and Thomas Roos, who's really like showing us a certain kind of topics which are brought to a series, and to see how it's to see what is on the backdrop, to see what is the archival move to this. And if we go up, we could just mention Claire's trend, because I don't want to leave even if we're 1 minute up. So Claire's trend is a woman photographer who collected a lot of images with with women and snakes, and she says from about herself that she really hates snakes, and that she really is like, oh my god, she's despised by snakes. But therefore, maybe this is something. She said she had she had an image of a snake, and she put it out and put it in her scrapbook, and then she closed the scrapbook. But again, you can see her work is about finding a lot of images of women with snake. And again, it is said, and I can't say it because I'm relying on what the information I got. What you see here is what might be written on the back of the image. So what she is doing, she is not scanning and putting it together, but she's transcribing what she finds on the back of the photograph, and then she puts it to she puts it into this lettering, which is a very clear wording, and then she does I don't know, a screen print on this kind of image which she does. So for me it was very interesting that she was working with the idea of a text and the image, and putting it together on the same plane, making it very, very big. But again, it's the idea of a series. It's more or less the same size. And for me, it is also very interesting and iconographic work, because it belongs to it deals with the different meanings of snakes and women can have in the history, in the cultural history. So it's also a very personal work, coming from a personal background, but then stepping into the realm of public and cultural heritage and collective memory maybe, and showing this very concentrated in these, I think, wonderful images. It's also, I'm blown away by the collection and the decisions she took. And on the other hand, it is very, very funny to have this poem generator, because it generates a lot of text and text and text, the text again from the words you find, or she found, on the backside of the images. When I was looking closely to Claire's Tran's work, it is all related to these text image ideas and this wonderful ongoing printer. But I said to myself, and that is, it's yours, Sebastian, what you said was very kind, I think, that we rely on your information. We don't know what is really written, what was really written behind on the backside of the photograph. But it is not so important for me to have this as a documentary idea. For me, it is very nice to think about how we approach the image by having this text, and on the same time leveling down the meaning which the text imposes on the image by the constant production of different texts, which are here in the poem generator. So what I found interesting, to get back to you, Sebastian, because it's always very, very strange to talk about another artist's work, is just to come back again a bit to your source, because what I was told is that the three of you are working with archival material. And the last thing what I really want to address again is, where are the archival materials from? You were just mentioned on the start, but maybe for everybody who says, oh God, they got it from eBay, this is crap. Please let us know a bit about where you found your archival stuff and why it is your main source.
Well, it's I found some stuff on flea markets, and I wanted to professionalize this, so I went to eBay, which is the biggest flea market. But it's not only a flea market. eBay is also a kind of an archive, but a chaotic archive. So it's, or as I sometimes call it, the last archive. Everything that is not sold on eBay is really trash. So it's this reason I go there, because it's not valued. And I think has been a long history in not only photography or art in the 20th century to care for the undervalued things and to find beauty where no one would suspect beauty to be found.
Mm-hmm. That's what we said about the artist as a Lumpensammler. That is, I can only say it in German, I have to admit. It's also where you find your stuff, and it's an all-purpose for artistical work. For me, it was
Ursula, I really like to answer one question that has been in the chat by Marie. Hi, Marie.
Oh, nice that no, I didn't see that.
That you are joining our talk today. And also hello to Katharina, which question, her question was already answered. And Marie is asking why not the source material of my works is shown next to my works. So she's, people always ask me, what about the original images? And I always tell them, this is not the original image, it's source material for me. And there is the big difference. So I take a photograph in a very classical way. I have something in the reality, which is a photograph, and then I use an optical system, in this case, a scanner, to create a file from which on I work. And this is pure photography, if you would call it like this. But on the other hand, it's, imagine what would happen if you would have a wonderful portrait of a nice boy, and then you would put the boy next to it all the time. And that's a very similar thing why I don't put up my source materials next to it, because it's that I really don't want to point out to these antiquities, because as I said, I like to refresh the black and white and make the viewers be able to see things they would not see. And if I would put up the source, then people would always go from left to right and see, aha, okay, this looks, in small it looks like this, and in big it looks like that. And then they would maybe not be interested in the thing, or I don't know why, but I think I care completely more about bringing up something that where you can discover all the things we have discussed, than just seeing an old yellowish piece of history. That's for something else. That's not for the art museum. Maybe that's for the historical museum.
Maybe I can add a little point that Ursula just pointed out. I think that your work works as a series somehow, but each work works for itself as well. So if you would put the original one next to it, it would be a completely different way of working, right? So like Alma here, you could easily put her on a wall and she would stand for herself. So you wouldn't need the original.
But it's also, I think it also breaks this idea about the same sizes is a series, because the important thing is that you really work with each picture and you decide for each picture how big it is. And if it's it's also called series, but I just wanted to add this, that it was this kind of convention that you have as a photographer in mind, that you always have to refer to certain sizes, and the certain sizes should be go on and go on and go on. And I know exactly what you said, because I have a good friend, she's a photographer, and I think she's a wonderful photographer. And she was once rejected by somebody who says, well, but this is not the same size, it's not a series. You know? And I think it's very wonderful to see here that it belongs to a series, it belongs to your work, but it is not done by topics, and it is not done by this idea of a certain size. So I'm sorry here, because we will end, and I did not see the conversation. I hope we understand. So sorry for all of you, you wanted to add something. I scrolled through, I think it was all answered, right? What we want to announce right now is that we will do an edition. So all of you are still here, sometimes, someone, so you can find an edition of Sebastian's work soon at sale through the Kunstverein, because he was so gracious and he honored us so much that we will do this small thing, this edition. Please tell our public about the edition, and we go on, and then we quit. Then we will quit the session. I think it's a nice ending. Sebastian, will you just say 2 or 3 words about the edition to come up?
Oh yes, I was just thinking that some of these, as I was looking on the works, they became completely different when I was looking through them than the editors were looking through them like 100 years ago. And even if in the last months, especially this motif and also another motif got a completely new twist to how to approach them. So it's really something that I think also refers to the title of the Biennale. It's also about the lives of these images, and they change as our lives change too.
Okay, thank you so much, Sebastian, for going through with us, and everybody who made this possible. We are super thankful as a Heidelberger Kunstverein, because we have to say, and we have to admit, that we really like to go with and with, to have this certain contact with people. As I said when we started, we try to be a platform, and we try even in every kind of guided tours to have a dialogue with our public. This could be a bit of a surrogate for this, for meeting us. On the other hand, thank you for the Kochi Biennale, that we're now had this wonderful opportunity to go very international, widespread, which we cannot do normally. So this is also something, while closing it up, we'll open it up too. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity as a small Heidelberger Kunstverein to go on so lively into international sphere. And we hope we have, and we will gain some public over when we publish it on our website, and you publish it, Yasmin, on your website. So let me express my greatest gratitude to all of you that you made it possible that we meet here in space.
Just a small correction there. We are the Chennai Photo Biennale.
Yeah,
not
I'm
the
sorry.
Kochi Biennale. We would love to be the Kochi Biennale someday.
I am very sorry for the Chennai
problem.
Biennale. I work right now with some people from the Kochi Biennale, and I'm mixed up in my mind, because the funny thing is we can't see each other. We are totally mixed up in our brains, because we are on so different levels in the world right now. But then I do something like very, very unpolite. So please take my...
Well, hopefully when the times are better and all of us are able to travel, you should come down and experience both the Chennai Biennale as well as the Kochi Biennale.
Thank you. No, we talk about a lot of climate things right now. So it's also, there are so many paradoxical things coming up with this. But yes, I would really love to see you all in person again, and I hope it happens soon. So bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you so much, Ursula and Chuchi again. And we have one more session next Friday at 2:30 with the Chennai Photo Biennale, and we will see the Wilhelm Hack Museum. So if you want to join us again, and again, thank you everybody, and see you very soon.
Thank you. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you. Thank you, Yasmin.
Bye.